Sonlin and Herwig Konings are founding partners of Security Token Group. All opinions expressed by them or guests on this podcast are solely their opinions and do not represent the views of Security Token Group or its subsidiaries. You should not take any opinion expressed on the show as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or follow any investment strategy. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Security Token Show. We're coming to you from our studio here in sunny Miami, Florida. I'm your host, Kyle Sonlin, and I'm joined by my co-host and business partner, Herwig Konings.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, I cannot wait to jump into the episode today because we have quite a few updates for the show as we kick off season 4. But before we do that, I would like to share a word from this week's sponsor. This episode of the Security Token Show is brought to you by this week's sponsor, REALT Technology Limited, a blockchain-enabled issuer, fund manager, and technology provider focused on eliminating the barriers to invest in, trade, and leverage exclusive real estate, private equity, and other real-world assets through decentralized finance, or DeFi. The platform is driving adoption of security tokens, both as an issuer and as a platform to enable other institutions to do the same. REALT has launched its own security token offering backed by equity in the business on top of a revenue share component to give investors exposure to the upside of the clients using the REALT platform. So to learn more about REALT and the RST token, check out their white paper and pitch deck today at realio.fund. That's realio.fund to learn more.
And really a big thank you to REALT for making this episode of the Security Token Show possible. Now, before we jump right into it, let me give you a quick update on the programming of today's show. We're going to be talking about the latest security token industry news. Then Kyle's going to hit you with the newest security token offerings, as well as an update on that secondary trading activity. And then finally, we're going to have today's main topic, where we're going to discuss how finance is going to be transformed using the blockchain. Now, without further ado, we do want to start off the show with our Companies of the Week segment. So this is where we choose an organization each that we think did the most for the industry in the previous week. So without a further ado, for episode 88, season 4, Kyle, who do you got?
Kicking it off, season 4, we're going in strong. So you may know that Japan is a leader in the security token industry. They've been very forward-thinking in both regulation and institutional adoption of blockchain-based assets for all of their securities transactions around the country. It's been fascinating to watch over the last couple of years now that we've been doing the show. And this week is like none other. We've got SUMITOMO MITSUI Trust Bank, and this is a $500 million asset under management bank based out of Japan. And they are not only interested in blockchain and the security token space, but they are actually launching their own security token offering backed by an underlying portfolio of assets that they have under management. And this is really exciting because we're talking about investment banks adopting this technology and driving the facilitation of digitizing capital markets. And so essentially what this works is it's a paper-based benefactory note that they are having as a representation of that underlying asset investment portfolio. And they took this investment vehicle that is a blockchain-based security token, and they took it to the Japanese regulators to have it rated, and it was actually rated A1, which was the highest level of rating that you could get for that offering. So they took their deal, they brought it to the regulators, everybody loves it, and they're going to be launching this security token offering. I do also have to note that SUMITOMO MITSUI is actually a member of the Japan Security Token Association, which is an organization that we joined just last year. And so we're happy to support the global ecosystem of security token adoption. And so for all of those reasons, SUMITOMO MITSUI Trust Bank is my company of the week for episode 88.
That's a phenomenal choice. I mean, first of all, a huge bank getting active. Japan has been getting super active itself, and now they're finally issuing all kinds of security token offerings rated not by steak sauce, but actually by, their rating system. And that was a huge deal because we saw the same thing happen here in the United States with last year or a few years ago, Fat Brands did a corporate debt offering for $40 million, and they got it rated by Morningstar, and it was rated higher solely because it was on the blockchain. So for all the reasons that you just mentioned, I think that's a phenomenal choice, Kyle.
Very, very exciting stuff, and we know that institutional banks do tend to drive a lot of the adoption for the industry and pave the way for everybody else. So very exciting stuff there. And how about you, Herwig? Who you got for this week?
Well, I don't want anybody to call this out for favoritism for being a local company because it is my choice, a fellow Miami startup. They're actually a few blocks over in a different office, and they're called SeriesOne. They're an issuance platform. They're a FINRA registered broker-dealer, which means they have to pay attention to the compliance and the regulations, and they're scrutinized a little bit more than traditional fintech companies. And actually, the reason why they're my first time winner on the show is because they have partnered up with CPROP, Crypto Properties, which is actually a blockchain for real estate transactions and issuance. And that's going to be powering their new marketplace, their new exchange, SeriesOne Exchange, which is actually going to be set up first in Liechtenstein, which is actually one of the premier European jurisdictions for issuing security tokens because there's a lot of pro-blockchain legislation there. And so I'm excited to see this go live. They're looking to presumably issue and trade security tokens out of the European Union with their new marketplace. There are no further details at this time, but I'm rooting for them, and that's why they won my company of the week.
That's fantastic. Very, very exciting stuff there. Seeing that the inflow of broker-dealer approvals and a lot of these regulatory complexities and licenses that have been needed sorely for the adoption of new markets in the fintech space, especially here in the US. It's great to see yet another entrant into the space from a broker-dealer perspective. More real estate. We know real estate is a fantastic use case for blockchain-based assets, and this seems like a great partnership here, an exciting product, and shout out to Miami.
We're going to be looking out for more updates from this for sure. Now, let's get to the rest of the show, but before I do want you all to know that everything we discuss on this show, it's sourced from stomarket.com/news, as well as the trading information we discuss, as well as actually our blog where we have a lot of Medium content you can further go check out. Now, with that, let's get into it.
And moving into our next segment, which our long-term listeners may recognize as a new segment here for season 4, is our top 5. This is where Herwig and I have picked the 5 biggest pieces of news that we could find and couldn't wait to discuss together alongside our listeners here on the show. And so for the first piece of news that we wanted to break into, it comes from INX. And you may recognize INX as a cryptocurrency and security token exchange. Now, they burst onto the scene 6 or 9 months ago, announcing that they had released what they were calling a tokenized IPO. And the goal here was that they were fully registered by the US and were going to be fundraising for a security token backed by a revenue share agreement in the business operations. And so INX has been currently fundraising, and they've done a successful job in really spreading the gospel of security tokens.
Yep.
And they've been successful in their fundraise thus far. And now they've actually made headlines for another fundraiser and piece of news around their financing, and this is that they're actually SPACing as well. So if you remember that registered IPO, we actually talked about it on the show, it's not really an IPO because it's not backed by equity, right? It's backed by a revenue share agreement of how much money that the company's making on their operations, and now they're taking the equity in the business, all outstanding shares, and that will be acquired by private equity firm Valdi. And it will be listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange. So they're taking their equity and they're listing that on the Canadian Stock Exchange through a SPAC. And then they're doing, in conjunction, the security token offering for the revenue share on their assets there and the profits. And that fundraise closes April 17th. But this $32 million SPAC is a really big deal. And I don't think that anyone saw this coming.
Just in case you don't know what a SPAC is, essentially what we're talking about here is a Canadian public company run by a private equity firm has acquired INX, which actually is a foreign company, is not a US-based company. And as a result of acquiring that company, INX is essentially going public. All the while, they're doing a profit-sharing token fundraise here in the United States, registered as a public offering, so all of us could participate in it and get exposed to just specifically the profits of the platform. So I would imagine that there's going to be some interesting dynamics, especially once both are listed and trading on secondary markets. And of course, presumably the profit sharing token by INX will be listed on its own exchange, while of course, if you will, getting exposure to the equity interest would be listed on the Canadian exchange. Interesting approach.
We'll definitely have to see how that plays out. We've seen examples of an asset being listed on two different platforms, but in that case, at least with Overstock, it was the same exact asset that was trading on two different places. It's going to be interesting to see how these two assets, between the equity listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange as well as this revenue share component on the security token exchange, it'll be interesting to see how those things are correlated and which ones move up and which ones move down.
Definitely some pioneering stuff, to say the least. And if you are interested in their IPO, it is worth mentioning that it's still open. It actually ends April 17th, so it is still live for you to participate in if you're interested.
Definitely go check that out.
But with that, let's get into number 2, the DTCC. That's a Depository and Trust Clearing Corporation. They're actually the largest clearing and settlement provider in the entire world. They don't do billions, they don't do trillions, they do quadrillions in securities settlement across the entire world for exchanges and marketplaces listed around the world. And actually, they announced recently a partnership with ING and 70 other financial institutions, legitimate institutions, and they actually are going to be trialing out the FinP2P platform that's actually created by Onera. It was actually showcased at the Security Token Summit a few weeks ago, and it is designed to work with multiple blockchains and multiple custody providers and create a platform for institutions like this to go ahead and settle their trades instantly. So that's really cool stuff. That's the T0 stuff we're all looking for when it comes to security tokens. Huge value proposition, and they're in love with it. That's the institution saying, hello, we're looking for a solution, and blockchain is the answer.
And you may recognize the DTCC as they were thrust into the public lights just a couple of months ago or weeks ago at this point with the whole Robinhood scandal. You had GameStop and many of these other public market stocks that were flying off the handle and the prices were going ballistic. And the problem with a lot of the traditional public market infrastructure is that they have 2 or 3 days of settlement time from Herwig trading me one share. It can take 2 or 3 days before that's actually filed on record.
Business days.
For it. Yeah. Business days, exactly. So you're talking it could be even more when we're talking about a Friday. And so the problem really with that is that when we have these high frequency trading that happens now all of the time, thousands and thousands of shares that are being traded on a per second basis, it just doesn't really work to have a 3 to 4 day settlement time sometimes. And especially when you have these short and long positions, derivative positions that have margin requirements and many other things that can change on a day-to-day basis, all that stuff really needs to be upgraded. That's the gospel of security tokens that we're seeing, and it's great to see that the DTCC is beginning to embrace that and are exploring ways to make that a reality for all of our financial markets.
I'll tell you, this one almost won my company of the week. That's how big of a deal this one is, I think. Should we get to number 3?
Yeah, let's dig right into number 3. And number 3 is almost taking it fully in the other direction. We're talking about Realty and Mount Pelerin. And these are 2 of the most innovative financial technology players that we have worldwide. They're both focused on international investors, but Realty is a real estate tokenization provider based here in Florida in Boca Raton. And what they're doing is they're taking, if you've listened to the show, you certainly have heard me say this many times, but they've taken 75 real estate properties, they've tokenized those, which allows them to sell fractionalized shares of each one of those properties directly to investors, which then get to receive equity in the actual real estate property, as well as the rental dividends that come alongside it, which can be double-digit percentages on top of that equity appreciation. This is a pretty cool investment vehicle and one that internationally has really caught wildfire. And so Realty announced that they have a partnership with Mount Pelerin. Mount Pelerin you also may recognize because they also have their own equity that they've tokenized and they have listed on Uniswap's decentralized exchange. And so Realty and Mount Pelerin have come together to list and to issue these assets together. Realty is targeting that international audience. Mount Pelerin has the infrastructure built out through the bridge protocol in order to make that happen. I think this is really huge news because it's 2 heavyweights coming together to make things happen.
You gotta love the infrastructure coming together. Realty initially invested a lot of money, of course, issuing those 75 tokens on their own protocol that they had created, and now leveraging the bridge protocol. I know, for example, they're going to have app user experience improvements and things like that, as well as many of the other benefits that Mount Pelerin has already developed with their own technology stack. So that's awesome news.
Very exciting stuff, and they're integrated in the whole DeFi movement, so you should expect to see a lot of that being integrated moving forward, and definitely this was a big one that I wanted to hint at and highlight in our top 5.
Well, again, let's get to number 4 then, shall we?
I'm ready
Number
for it.
4 is about XRP, the coin that is owned and developed by Ripple. And as we all know, they are embroiled in what we call the case of the year. So last year we had SEC versus Telegram. We did see that come to a close. But shortly before, in December, the previous term of the SEC under the Trump era, led by Jay Clayton, let a little prize go before they left. They said, hey, Ripple, we're going to sue you for unregistered security sales, which is what the SEC has been enforcing pretty much throughout their entire time since the ICO era. And so this is a big deal. Ripple is one of the longest standing and largest cryptocurrencies around in the world. And so the implications of what the courts decide for the XRP token potentially being a security or not, that's really what's at stake here, could have a lot of important effects, after effects as a result, precedent that gets set in court. We may see more lawsuits fly. We may see an actual new cryptocurrency framework get developed. Who knows? This could have major ripple effects. But let me give you the update on the XRP case there. What happened was actually the first big news is that last month, a third party tried to come in and intervene and also participate in this case. This does happen. In this case, it was actually the Deaton law firm representing over 6,000 different Ripple XRP holders, I should say. And ultimately, they said that the SEC basically caused them damage, about $15 billion worth of damage. And that's, of course, when the SEC came out with their announcement in December, the markets went into free fall. This could cause the whole token to go into shock and be useless and worthless, if you could say. And then, of course, actually, some of the major exchanges like Coinbase went ahead and delisted XRP, making it very difficult for holders to sell and making it very difficult for anyone else now to get in. So that had a big deal, and they said, they don't like this. But actually, originally, the court said, this has nothing to do with our case until we figure out whether it is a security or not. And now they've gone back and reviewed, I should say, and they have actually approved this new third party to intervene and participate. So that's a big deal.
Wow.
And actually, maybe that's part of why XRP is on a 2-month high right now. Or it might be because the SEC also had some of their documents removed and redacted because they weren't relevant to the case. So signs potentially more good news for the case. And then finally, CEO Brad Garlinghouse of Ripple Labs actually came out and said that he found that the case was actually ironic, mostly because they were trying to charge Ripple for selling unregistered securities, but the whole point of this court case is the SEC doesn't know whether it's a security or not. So lots of things going on there. Needless to say, he thinks the company will be fine no matter what, as Ripple's payment networks, he says, are at all-time high when it comes to transactions. So we'll definitely continue to keep you updated on this very, very important legal case.
There's definitely a lot of chatter around all of the blockchain and crypto communities that the SEC is on unsteady footing here with a lot of their case, and it does seem like having to redact and take some steps back does make it seem like they're not quite as confident as they were before. There was an April Fool's joke going around. They had settled. They have not done that. But you never know what could happen in the future, especially as this case continues to drag out, if they may look to find some kind of settlement in order to get a win for both sides. But I think really what you really pointed at, and we've talked about this on the show before, is that I really hope that this is an opportunity for the SEC to begin to define some of these guidelines for digital assets and security tokens. There's a lot that still needs to be clarified and still a lot that needs to be officially recognized by the regulators.
It's true.
As we talk about here on the show all of the time, everything we do is fully legal, 100% compliant, but it's almost like we're trying to fit into existing regulations instead of being able to have digitally native opportunities to take advantage of new developments and new innovations. So I hope that they take an opportunity here to really help define that and provide some additional clarification.
Especially given the fact that these are existing regulations that were created 80 plus years ago.
Right.
So in some cases, the idea of tokenized stocks and investment opportunities certainly was not on their mind at the time.
I don't think so.
Let's hope we can adapt and modernize like many other countries have, but it's not going to happen in the next couple of minutes. So let's get to number 5. And number 5 is actually about a issuance platform in the space called POLYMATH. So POLYMATH was one of the first or on the block, if you will, and they actually raised a $40 million ICO. It was highly touted, and they're actually now building a purpose-built blockchain for security tokens called POLYMATH. Now, nothing really here to do about the company, but it is worth pointing out that their very well-known CEO, Trevor Kverko, recently found himself arrested for sexual assault allegations. So definitely a very serious matter. Now, the problem that we have here, most importantly, is actually that POLYMATH has gone ahead and acted like nothing has happened. In fact, they've gone back to previous press releases, and we can confirm they have changed and scrubbed out Trevor. And actually, they have put in an interim CEO, a new CEO, and haven't acknowledged at all. And so this is my actual opportunity, since we have this outlet, to say that's not, I think, good business practice, Kyle. I think when something like this happens, the company needs to acknowledge it, they need to get out ahead of it, and they certainly need to distance themselves and say they obviously don't approve any of this type of conduct. The wrong thing to do is to go out and pretend that it never happened and hope that no one ever notices, because let me tell you, the industry is definitely aware of what's going on here.
Yeah, this is really shocking news. We just certainly need to wait for all the details to come out before we can make any conclusions. But thoughts and prayers for everybody affected by the any potential incidents that happened. You certainly hope that these allegations are false, but it's looking pretty grim. So this is just quite a case, and you hate to see it. So it's just terrible stuff.
And that's the top 5 most important things you need to know about last week. With that, let's get into some more of the news. Let's talk about some industry updates this week, shall we? Starting off, we've got Anchorage, which is a crypto custody provider that supports digital securities. And we've got Prometheum, which is a security token issuance platform. Anchorage announced last week that they will be able to custody digital securities traded on Prometheum's retail investor platform. And on top of that, the legitimacy of the security token space is growing because in this case, Anchorage got specific approval from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, that's the OCC, to custody these security tokens on behalf of broker-dealers thanks to their bank charter. So that is really awesome news, and it's actually a huge win for Anchorage as well. And moving on, in Singapore, it happens to be a proven digital securities hotbed, with much of Asia actually following in its path. So a great article in the Bangkok Post came out, and it goes over outlining the industry and the pace of innovation in the neighboring countries. And one thing is clear from this article, I'll tell you, iStocks, HG Exchange, and actually many others are poised for success, with actually Japan not far behind and Thailand not much farther behind that. And a lot of this is actually attributed to the fintech sandboxes set up by regulators there, enabling more fintech startups to operate in the security token space in order to launch without actually needing the full approval and licenses from the regulators and being able to sort of proceed to issue digital securities in the sandbox. And for anyone interested in the Asian security token ecosystem, this is definitely a great read I recommend. And a resource article in IR Magazine, that's Investor Relations Magazine on their website, gave an overview of Overstock's token, which used blockchain technology to distribute the digital dividend while providing liquidation rights to the common shares. And the Overstock token is actually available to trade only through broker-dealer subscribers to T0.com, which acts as a blockchain-based secondary marketplace with full approvals from regulators to do so. The dividend transaction by Overstock took place in the usual manner using ComputerShare, the transfer agent, but then a duplicate or courtesy copy, as they call it, of the OSTKO token also exists on the blockchain to accommodate future digitization of capital markets. And the dividend required some pioneering work for their investor relations team, according to this article, of course. And the industry response on the dividend ranged from uncertainty about the share price impact and skepticism from regulators actually approving this to go forward to all around genuine excitement from our side in the industry. Now, through education and clarification to investors, the ultimate overall reaction was positive. Actually, in fact, proof in the pudding, volumes increased by more than 900% and dollar value traded was up tenfold over the course of 2020. And so over at Security Token Market, where we track these prices, we have seen the overstock token increase 517%. And the firm's leadership predicts that 2021 is on pace to bring thousands of new security token offerings and more than 100 new listings on the secondary markets all around the world. That's a tenfold improvement in itself over 2020. So that's very exciting news from Overstock, and we can't wait to see the progression this year. Check out that article in IR Magazine's website. And on this week's weekly article of Tokenize This, that's Peter Gaffney's series, and he also is part of the Security Token Advisors team, and he goes into the tokenization of pre-IPO shares and actually how employees with vested securities or interest equity can actually sell their stake to obtain liquidity for it. And of course, all of this happening before the company goes public, if ever at all. So this is advantageous for employees to liquidate their equity, as well as beneficial for the investors to get into a company at pre-IPO valuations to obtain a potential higher upside once it does go public. Another great job, as always, by Peter, and a further deep dive into the article can be found over on our Medium blog. And industry media site Securities.io, they came out with yet another interview series, this time featuring Mohsin Masood, who is actually the founder and the CEO of Accrue, which is a tokenization real estate investing website that is tokenizing its deals. You may recognize the brand from being the gold sponsor of the Security Token Summit a few weeks ago, where Kyle and I both spoke. And in an interview, Mohsin reveals how he first got introduced to the blockchain, what inspired him to actually launch Accrue in the first place, as well as why he believes real estate is the perfect asset for tokenization and how he sees the industry developing in the next 5 to 10 years. So if you're curious, go over to securities.io to give it a read. And moving into our events section here, we've got the virtual Digital Securities and Tokenization Summit in May 19th, as well as the 20th, hosted by DigiShares, the issuance platform. So learn everything you need to know about what is happening in the world of tokenization by going to this event. You will hear from leading figures offering, insights about how to go ahead and move forward with security tokens. You'll hear about it from within the real estate sector. You'll gain new perspectives on how established companies are actually renewing their business by introducing security tokens and the blockchain in general. Actually, both Kyle and myself, we will speak at this event. And we're actually going to be joined by individuals like T0 CEO Sam Norsalehi. We've got the POLYMATH CEO as well, and DigiShares CEO Klaus Scanning too. The event is 2 days, and I'm looking forward to yet another very successful security token focused event. So check out more information for this event at fintechdisrupt.io. And to end our segment, I do, of course, want to remind you all that the Security Token Show has a weekly clubhouse. That's an app where you can audio in, drop in to listen to us. It's on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. Reach out to us if you do need an invite. And otherwise, be sure to book your calendar. We bring in tons of different speakers from CEOs as well as different lawyers in the space, people who run exchanges, and all kinds of other individuals to help add to our weekly topic. So come join us, even ask us questions on how blockchain this week will transform investing. And now let's get over to Kyle to hear about the latest security token offerings and secondary market update news.
And moving into our new STOs and updates section for the week, we're kicking it off with Blockstream, which is a large Bitcoin mining company that's launching an innovative product to give investors access to a derivative Bitcoin product. Now, Bitcoin is mined by dedicating computing power to the network to essentially solve complex math equations over a period of time. We've heard this before. And the company, Blockstream, is selling a redeemable note backed by their Bitcoin mining power. The goal of these tokens, the BMN tokens, is to offer qualified investors with a simpler way to invest in the Bitcoin mining sector directly. Investing in Bitcoin mining can be more profitable than just investing in Bitcoin itself, while also adding security to the network as a whole. Additionally, the firm actually argues that Bitcoin mining returns offer strong exposure to the price upside of Bitcoin, while at the same time offering significantly lower volatility of returns. So, let's talk terms. Now, each token is going to be representing 2,000 terahashes per second, which equates to a certain amount of Bitcoin that they can mine over a period of time. So don't worry too much about that, but that's the processing power that the computing power is creating. That's what you're investing in. The note is a 3-year investment. So after 3 years, the token will be automatically redeemed for the amount of Bitcoin that was mined over that 3-year period of time by the mining farm. The firm is seeking to raise 12.5 million euros in the first tranche of this BMN security token offering. And this is a pretty institutional deal though, not a lot of retail is available here, as each security token is going to cost 200,000 euros a piece, and it will not be fractionalized. So this is definitely for the big Bitcoin players only. The BMN token offering is set to go live on the 7th of April, 2021 for international investors only. No US is allowed. So you can check it out though on the financial platform Stalker. We've covered them before. They're doing great deals. That's STOKR.io. And moving on, of course, which platform is launching more STOs than Realty? Well, we actually do not have an answer to that. They are the leading issuer, and we've got another STO from them. Please welcome 5601 South Wood Street in Chicago, Illinois. They are officially sold out on Realty with a total investment of $297,000 for a price of $54 per token, with an expected 10% per year in yield. So as is usual with Realty, the token's sold out in minutes, and they continue to dominate. So great work from Realty. And we have yet another exciting STO announced this week from Fintellum, who recently opened investment into the KEEP, KEEPPAS, a share company registered in Latvia that is set to be the first security token offering that is listed on the Fintellum tokenization platform. Remember, they raised money for this very thing last year. The investment project aims to scale a market-proven network of short and long-term self-service storage facilities. The fundraiser is set to develop across Riga, Latvia, and is initially followed by the Lithuania and Estonia jurisdictions, fully covering all of the Baltic states, and later following with the expansion across Europe. This fundraiser is related to the first phase of business development, offering an unprecedented ability to invest in cryptocurrencies in a physical business and become share token holders in a growing company. The STO is set to be represented on the Ethereum blockchain with a total project funding seeking around 850,000 euros for this round, and the offering is open to investments and individuals and corporate entities alike, and showcases a direct investment into the KEEP AS share capital without any special purpose vehicle structures. So this is exciting to see the coming developments of the industry. Again, we're talking worldwide access here, and we're going to be sure to keep you updated as these things progress into the future. And now we move into our market update. So kicking it off with some market news, Security Token Market published its first monthly report in the security token trading market here on the secondary market. That's all the things that are trading. And here are some of the highlights from the trading assets in March. We had 28 live tokens with a market cap up about 20% to 620 million, and a volume up about 11% to nearly 7.5 million in total volume. When we're talking about some of the best performing assets, we had Mount Pelerin up almost 250%, Blockchain Capital up nearly 150%, and Apolline Street 18276 up nearly 40%. The worst performing were all three real estate properties, 2 Realties, 1024 Apolline and 8342 Schaefer, as well as Aspen Digital that brought up the back end. In terms of top marketplaces, not a whole lot changed here. We had T0 leading the way at 450 million in total market cap, Open Finance breaking the 100 million mark, and then Merge to round it out at 37 million. You can check out all of that on blog.stomarket.com for more information. And now we move into the secondary trading market. As a reminder, all pricing data is sourced from stomarket.com. And the total STO market cap this week was actually down a few percent at 612 million. Our top tier tokens on the secondary market, T0 and Overstock, both had declines, with T0 down nearly 9% this week. But despite those price declines, the T0 shares are still seeing pretty solid trading volumes each day, with around 250K in trading over the last week. Compare that to Overstock, which was also down this week, but it sees so much less volume on a daily basis despite having a stronger brand image as a public company. The really interesting thing for me is that Overstock is the arbitrage opportunities between the publicly traded shares on NASDAQ and the tokenized shares trading on T0. This arbitrage window, which we've noted in months past, has now fully slammed shut as both shares have closed at $66 as of Monday. This seems to be a consistent trend, signifying that some of the broker subscriptions T0 has prioritized over the past 6 months are market making these two assets and are capitalizing on what was once a very wide arbitrage window between the two identical assets. We certainly have covered that many times before. It does open up an interesting conversation around public market assets and 24/7 markets. Since security tokens are traded around the clock to facilitate global investment, in theory, there's always going to be those price differences between the assets listed on the security token markets versus on the traditional markets. While these assets may not always be identical, you could presumably get exposure to different industry verticals through these two different mediums, allowing for you to capitalize on the arbitrage opportunities between these two on both a short-term and a long-term cost basis. We'll see how prevalent this becomes as the industry expands and more assets come to market, but for now, only time will tell. There were a few other interesting price movements to note this week, and we're going to kick it off with Blockchain Capital, which has been on a strong price rise as of late. Now up to over $15 per share, many think the run isn't done yet. The shares represent investment interest in Blockchain Capital's Liquid 3 venture portfolio, which includes a significant exposure to Coinbase equity. This is pretty notable because Coinbase is going to be listing on NASDAQ April 14th. Because of that, the significant portion of Blockchain Capital's portfolio is going to be liquid soon, leading many to expect that a distribution is going to come to the BCAP shareholders from that liquidity event. On top of that, the firm publishes a weekly NAV, updating it, shareholders on the total value of the fund, which is up to $20 per share, as opposed to the $15 on the trading markets, which is nearly a 30% disparity. Something to watch over the next few weeks. Keep an eye on that for sure. Finally, we turn our attention to the tokenized real estate sector, which has also had quite the week. Now, we've covered how the realty tokens can see some significant short-term volatility due to the price mechanics on the exchange that they trade on, Uniswap, but that's actually not the headline that caught my eye this week. Instead, it was the St. Regis Aspen, a tokenized hotel trading on T0, which followed the rest of the T0 assets with a pretty tough week. The shares plummeted 20% on Monday for an unknown reason, despite the fact that they've held the $1.20 to $1.30 range since listing in August. Security token market researchers are digging into why now is the reason that these things are dropping, and maybe we'll have an answer coming soon. But in short, be careful in whatever you invest in and definitely do your own research before investing in anything. And moving into our main topic discussion this week, we're talking about how blockchain is going to transform investing. And so we're talking about blockchain, we're talking about capital markets. I think maybe the best place to start is to really go with those initial definitions about what we're talking about here. So Herwig, how would you define a security token and what that means for the market?
Yeah, obviously we're transforming, investing with security tokens. So what is a security token, right? Well, security token is essentially a digital investment. So anything like a stock or any really profit-sharing contract or interest, just like we talked about with the IPO of INX, is considered a security by the SEC and most regulators around the world. So when we're talking about transforming investing, we're talking about transforming investing using security tokens, which is really just digitizing the investment process. Would you agree?
Yeah, so essentially you're taking that real world asset and then you're creating a digital representation of it. They're legally tied together so that you own this one share of this digital token. You also own one share of the real world version. And what that allows us to do is really create so much more efficiencies in the capital markets and in this system. And that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about a security token. It's this investment in a digital token that legally represents an investment in something that we can see in the tangible world. And so this is incredibly exciting because it really does transform access into investment products. And we talk about this all the time, but really in the traditional markets, going IPO or going on the stock market is really the only way for an investor to actually be able to get access in owning a lot of these different businesses. The private markets are incredibly illiquid, meaning that they don't trade the same way. It hasn't been possible for the average Joe to get access in these things. And the digital markets can create this opportunity for equality for everyone, not only here just in the US, but internationally as well.
Totally agree with that. I mean, even through Corona, we saw the pandemic create a forced digital transformation for many, many different businesses. And if we look at Robinhood actually as a company, they've made it easier to access Wall Street through their app, a new interface that's leveraging digitization to make it easier for investors to participate. We started to see this trend more and more, and now it's happening thanks to security tokens for investors all around the world to be able to participate and access different offerings, which of course also leads to potentially more demand, right? Because if you weren't able to participate in the first place, even though you wanted to, you weren't considered part of the demand equation. But if you make it easier for more people to be able to access your investment opportunity and there is demand for it, well then of course, you're going to get more opportunity, more investment, and potentially better, more efficient secondary markets.
Yeah, and by access, we're talking about new assets. We're private companies, startups, apps that you've been using on your phone that you'd love to be able to buy some shares of now because they may be successful in the future. We're talking about luxury sports cars or art, right? Buying a share of a Van Gogh painting, which is something that would never have been possible before in the traditional markets, and creating all these opportunities, intellectual property, and investing in your favorite creative works and a lot of these different pieces on top of the business vehicles that we've covered already on the show and many episodes past, as well as what we have today. And so on top of all of that, we're talking about increasing global access. You mentioned this, right? So of course, bringing these new vehicles is exciting. These new investment products is incredibly exciting. But also bringing traditional investments and all of these traditional things that we're used to here in the US and opening those opportunities up to the world is also just its own opportunity. That's so much additional demand and capital driving towards our real estate sector, driving towards our traditional public equity sector that you might not have access to if you were somebody outside of the US or in a different jurisdiction. And so with security tokens, by creating a standard that everybody can use and participate with, it creates this opportunity for anyone to have the same access to any type of investment, which is just so exciting.
It's huge. Let's walk it from another angle, right? So if you wanted to invest in a startup or a real estate opportunity, first of all, you usually have to be someone who has the exclusive access to those opportunities. So regardless of whether you qualify, the idea of finding a fund for a real estate project is very difficult to begin with. If you did find them, you're probably hopping on a couple phone calls, you're doing a little back and forth, your attorneys may be chatting, and then finally you'll do some document signing and the investment can be transferred. When that can be done completely digital, you can now have the access be much easier. The actual process is much cheaper and more efficient. As a result, the minimum investment can go down and therefore create even more access for people to be able to participate. This is the power of digitization. This is what blockchain is doing to transform investing. What else you got?
Well, I really am excited about this opportunity of automating a lot of the things that we've talked about with the DTCC, for example, right? You're talking about taking the compliance and all of the settlement features that traditionally would have to be leveraged by manual processes, which cost a lot of money, which make it very difficult for firms to actually be able to provide these services directly to investors. And by automating a lot of these processes, by leveraging the blockchain technology, it drastically reduces the barrier to entry for investors to be able to participate. It reduces the need for firms to be able to sell your data and sell your privacy like we've seen with Robinhood happening in the past. It can create a much more inclusive financial system for anyone around the world because we're bringing that cost basis of actually leveraging these trading features and these opportunities, bringing that cost of capital down and really creating a new opportunity for people. So even that's incredibly exciting for me.
I mean, what you're talking about there is really the whole governance and management of investors in general as a result of digitizing using the blockchain becomes dramatically easier. The whole process is now digital, if you will. For example, when I wanted to get dividends and distributions, it typically would maybe happen via a wire and it would be slow and it maybe happen on a monthly or quarterly basis. Now, as a result of the technology, an issuer can go ahead and actually pay out thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. It really doesn't matter because it's all programmatically through an algorithm, through smart contracts that pay everybody the amount that they deserve based on how much they own via the token. And on top of that, the idea of doing daily dividends is a major, major game changer, because when I had to use a bank to pay out my investors, that was extremely costly to do. And then on top of that, when it comes to voting, you have to usually show up in person. There's usually very little technology used by issuers to manage their investors. Now, of course, thanks to it all being under the same sort of digital roof, it becomes very easy for me to enable people from around the world to vote with their rights that they have in the actual investment.
Yeah, this is not easy, right? We're talking about anyone around the world. So you've got, 150 or 200 countries around the world now, and tracking the ownership from one country to another, from one investor to another. They may have different standards on who can invest in what vehicle. They may have a standard around what kinds of assets can go where. And then just imagine tracking that cap table between all of those different countries. It would be incredibly difficult to do manually, and understandable why it's not really something that's always offered. But that being said, with the blockchain, we can keep track of this so much more effectively, which just provides so much more opportunity for really anyone around the world.
It makes things easier.
Any of that stuff, man. It's exciting. It's
absolutely.
really, really cool.
Remember, what we're basically telling you is yesterday, you would have to go and do a lot of work to find out your real estate investment opportunity. You'd have to go through many manual processes, or even physical, where you have to show up in person, do a call and things like that. And then you would basically get serviced the same exact way. You probably wouldn't hear anything. Maybe you get an update email or maybe something in the mail, and that's about it. Now, you can actually trade it. You can receive your dividends digitally. You can participate in voting digitally. You can access a website. And as a result of these technologies, it becomes cheaper and easier to make that investment into that real estate offering. And the very next day, just like with a company like REALT that you mentioned earlier, you could be owning security tokens almost near instantly that represent real estate and start getting paid. That didn't happen before, and now it absolutely is.
The future of finance is here. We're talking about new opportunities. We're talking about global access. We're talking about increased efficiencies. And I really think that that's a great place that we can call that main topic here on the episode. So, unless you have anything else you want to add about why it's changing.
No, I think we're only just getting started. There's definitely some other things like collateralizing your equity, much easier to take a loan, staking, and all kinds of other stuff that we're going to be getting into on this show for sure, and another main topic. But for now, I do want to remind you all that everything we discuss, and if you want to learn more, you can always go to STOmarket.com for all your latest news, trading information. We actually, as I mentioned earlier, on a weekly basis have our clubhouse at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Check
if you
that
need
out.
an invite,
Come hang out.
Definitely come hang out with us, ask us questions about this week's show, and meet some other industry leaders, CEOs, issuers, attorneys, all that are in this space as well.
We also just launched a newsletter, so you can check that out, coming out Monday mornings, hot into your inbox. What's dripping? By Jonah Schulman, head of communications at Security Token Market. Great newsletter. It's super casual, a lot of fun to read. Covers all of the must-read news each week. You can check that one out as well. And
first edition just came out yesterday.
Hot off the
this
press.
production here, so that's awesome.
So check us out on YouTube if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple Music or anywhere else you can listen to it. Definitely go to YouTube. You can see us on video. I know all you listening can't see all the great graphics and everything we got going on here. So check it all out. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening, and happy tokenizing.